Welcome to Louisiana Heartbeats. I'm Sudie Landry, and today is a super special day. Acadiana, sometimes things just don't work out where they work out as fast as we want them to do, but thanks to the patience of this guest that I have today, this is our third attempt to bring to you her awesome story. Jordan Wilson Sanders, thank you for not giving up on me.
You're so welcome.
Or AOC. And thanks for my patient director. Acadiana, Jordan has actually authored a book a while back that is a journal of her days of being the caretaker of her father with Alzheimer's. Now, in the original interview, Jordan, I am looking at the notes I asked, and because we couldn't get together, Acadiana, she blessed me with one of her books, and my questions way back then don't even fit into now that I've read your book. So I want to thank you again for taking time to come back to the show. And it's worth it because we've done a lot of improvement on our graphics. The audio is awesome. The director is paying just attention to us. We have a new member that's watching. They'll be part of the show later. It's an awesome day. We have almost AOC all by ourselves. So I'm excited that this show, honestly, I got good feelings about the show. So, what we're going to start with, number one, you were single, and I'm going to read it like this. You were an only child, a single mother, at that time an ex-wife, small business owner, and you stated that you were alone in this journey. And then you became a caretaker, because you were the only child. Now, that was enough going on in your life to stress out anybody, but to become the caretaker. And since I've read your book, the way you did it's like everybody should do that. Because after reading your book, I now have a deeper insight. And you know what I love about your book that you had kind of hesitated about doing? You actually, in your book, whatever way you were feeling, if you wanted to cuss, you cussed. I mean, if you wanted to cry, you cried. If you wanted to write, you wrote. You were real. And through your journey of 2017 days, I believe it was, you shared how you escaped for the day by writing poetry. And now you've incorporated those awesome poems of what you were really going through in this book, Days with My Father's Ghost. I have given your book so many titles that when I'm talking about it to other people, I'm serious that I had to get that straight. Days with My Father's Ghost. Okay, with that said, I wanted to let you know how important and what a difference it's made in us not getting together, that this book I've shared with so many people. I actually know people who are going through what you went through. I know people who are getting ready to go through what you went through. So with that said, since we have tried to get together since April, I believe it is, and it is now July?
Yes.
What has been going on with you in your book? Have you had any book signings?
No, I haven't had anything in a while because the last set of book signings that I was doing, I kept getting the same question from a lot of people, which kind of put some interest in me and sent me on my next project. I had a lot of people who were asking, with my children, how did I explain the disease? You know, how do you help your children understand what it is that they're experiencing, seeing happen to their loved one? So from there, I decided to write a children's book, which is called Mommy, What is Alzheimer's? Because that was the way that my children, pronounced it. And so the story itself is the conversation and the way that I would explain what was happening to my dad, to my children. So it seemed like it was a lot of people needed that information to know how do you address that.
Okay. Now, back to Acadiana. Acadiana, we're going to discuss a little bit about what's inside of this book that is available I do believe through Amazon.com or not
Ebook.
yet. Ebook, okay. So if you'd like information, her website is up there, and you'd like to know where she's at or where she's going to be sure to check out and send her a note, and she'll update you on that information. Now, back to what the book is actually about. You experienced the loss, the beginning of your journey with your dad. You experienced the loss of a mother, and she totally passed away from something else.
Cancer.
And it was and you were caretaking back then too.
When I was in high school, she was diagnosed and she died while I was in college.
Okay, so during these youth years, you were caught up with grown-up stuff and trying to do what you needed to do to further you and your family. And I have a note here that says 1 year after your father was diagnosed that you began to journal this book. And in this book, it's amazing not only the information that you gave, and I don't want to give too much away, but you journaled for 2 years before you actually published this book.
It was actually 6 years.
6 years, okay.
6 years. And I never intended to publish this. This was not the whole reason for the writing. The writing was my therapy. It was my escape. It was everything inside of me that I could no longer hold on to and that was consuming me. It was the way that I got it out. It was the way I survived it all.
So you were journaling, and somewhere in between, I think after 2 years,
I started typing.
That's what it was.
And created it into a book only to share with my father's family.
Right.
Because although I am an only child and I have no family here, my father's family is still in Chicago, hundreds of miles away. And I'm very close with them, but they're not here helping me. So at this point, I needed to put my father into a nursing home, which was something they couldn't quite understand because after his diagnosis, he progressed pretty rapidly, which they didn't see what was going on. So I put all my writings together for them to read and share with them so they could kind of understand what it was like for me every day. And from there, I just kept adding and sharing with them, and they're like, other people who are going through this need something like this.
And because she did that, in the section of the book, when his siblings came down to visit him, only then did they realize just how much you had done by yourself, and some of them broke down and kind of like the last visit here and there. But also, too, in this journey, there's a quote at the end of your book, on the back of your book, and I know I want to quote that later on, but I want you to be aware in case you don't want me to. In the very, very back of the book, that last thing that you wrote, okay, you want to read it? Within
this book, I will share with you my story of the 2013 days that I spent watching my father become a ghost, and how that ghost scared me into finding the courage that I never knew I had.
That gives me the chills just by that being said, because having read the book, it has so much more meaning for me, more knowledge, appreciation, patience with different people I know already that have shown signs. I'm watching mine very carefully too. Outsiders can see it a whole lot easier, but if you're a caretaker, that is really very powerful to experience that. Right there, when you wrote that, Jordan, that pretty well says what this book was. So why did you write the book? Why? Not only did you want to let everybody else understand what you went through and what decisions you made and why, you took them on that trip with you. But after you wrote the book, why did you write the book?
I wrote the book just to be able to understand the journey that I myself was on. It was also the only time that I cried, the only time that I let all the emotions that I was holding in, because I had to be a mom, I had to take care of my dad, I had to run a business, I had to be so many things that I couldn't let any of the plates drop. And when I was writing, it was my time. It was my time to cry and let it all out and just be a mess. And I was completely honest because I never thought anybody was going to read this. It's just my diary that I'm keeping.
And you did it a lot in poetry. You journaled actually the pain and the caretaking part, but then when you were going to your safe place where you could be who you were and writing your poetry, Wow. I mean, and you have stacks of poetry that tell the whole story just by itself. You could almost make a book just with that, telling the story by poems, by poetry, you know. And of course, you know, we want to go ahead and talk a little bit about your dad's illness and why is it so different, even though you lost your mother. There's two different pains there. Okay, so you were faced with difficult decisions, and that's why you began to write also. You discovered your father's own writings too, so how did you do, what happened?
I always knew he was a writer when he was in college. He never really did it after I was born. It was just something that we talked about that he had once been. But I noticed him in his room when he was still living with me, going through all of his old things, trying to put them in an order and trying to leave them behind in a way that would make sense to people. And that really meant something to me. I realized that his time was taken too soon. You know, he was not ready yet, and there were still things that he had hoped to accomplish that he was no longer able to. So that pushed me even further.
Jordan, as I'm listening to you, of course, like again, I said, I read the book, but I'm also remembering people I had in my beauty shop that I saw that coming, that even their own relatives didn't see. Now I'm going to ask you, did you see the symptoms before your father started
yes.
dealing with it?
Oh, yes. I knew. Probably it was close to almost a year before he was actually finally diagnosed. I knew something was wrong. And I would tell people, I would tell my friends, I would tell his doctors, and nobody would listen to me. They just assumed that my mother had passed a few years before and it was just depression.
Right.
And when I got divorced, I moved in with my father and living with him every day, just noticing every day how much more he could not do for himself and how different he was becoming. I knew it was something more than depression.
Also, too, in your book, you share how close your father and you were, and that was part that you were losing, that part also, and how you could go to him with advice, and basically you were best friends too.
Yes.
That's what I got out of the book.
Oh, he was always a shoulder that I could cry on and just listen to my problems, and even if he didn't have the answers, he would tell me, I'm just still going to be here for you while I'll help you figure it out. You know, we'll do it together.
Yes.
And I didn't have that, and this was a huge moment in my life where I needed that.
That's right. Now, with that said, your father used to be a traveler and he used to write. Okay,
My father was an old
he was
hippie.
kind of humorous in some of those.
Yes, he was.
Deep thinker in some of those poems I read.
Yes,
that was awesome.
and actually towards the end, I put a lot of his writings in all of his. I reached out to childhood friends of his who shared stories of what they remembered, because I didn't want the whole book to just be a sad tale about what he became. I also want to focus on who he once was, you know, the captured spirit that got lost. So he was very, very adventurous. He went to college in Africa and hitchhiked all over the United States. He lived in a cave for 2 years in Ashland, Oregon, and very adventurous man who ended up in Louisiana.
And he was writing his poetry.
Exactly, about all his experiences.
I laughed at, he was really deep. In one particular poem, he was like saying what he had to say, then he turned around and twisted it up a little bit. And then after a while, you weren't sure what he was saying. Then you went back and you read and go, okay, he's playing. But anyway, it seemed to be very educated, very alert. So I know it must have been heartbreaking whenever you began to lose less and less more. Now, I've heard a lot of people describe, Jordan, what it's like to be with Alzheimer's, but I have to tell you, you're telling the truth, sharing the tears, sharing the laughter, sharing the good things, not just the bad things, and end the book with his own writings shows his character. And you said, so that no one will forget him. You yourself would not, but to make sure. Now, I like doing things that would be shared with family members later, and what you did was you created the truth of what it's like to be a caretaker with someone you love, making decisions that you didn't just do it like that. You really had to go through some steps. You had to travel quite a bit to get help, and yet there were older sisters I believe it was, or was there a brother
Younger
in there?
sisters. No, he has
Younger?
3 younger sisters.
And they were having trouble being able to come visit and
And
help
his mom.
you and his mom and all that. So it takes a family to really have a support system. But from what I saw, they were wonderful, loving people, but they physically
Just couldn't be here.
could not be there.
And they were a phone call away. You know, middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm having a nervous breakdown, and they're still going to pick up the phone. And
You know what I also, too, want to share? In this book, it's not just her that's being affected. It's not just her that's adjusting and being a part of this journey. It's her children. I was so impressed and pray that other kids would be so loving, so kind, that they would go out of their way to try to include him. And he got to a point on one particular thing, it didn't happen. But I mean, there were certain things the kids would do with him. And so at certain times you would let the children be. As he progressed, you adjusted with the children. And they seemed to be understanding. I know they
I had
miss
to constantly
Pawpaw.
pay attention. I could tell just
Yeah.
from the tone, or, you know, I could hear the aggravation in his voice whenever he was getting too tired. And I knew that's when I
Yeah.
need to, you know, okay, Papa needs to take his rest. But it was constant paying attention and listening.
You painted a picture with your words when you were talking with your dad, and the moments that you saw your dad return, you just savored that moment. And then when you saw the ghost come, and what you said in your book was you weren't being caretaker. It was, I forgot, I should have written it down, but it was some quote you made, and you weren't taking care of just a stranger,
That's how I had to look at him.
you know. And
Whenever I had to do the things that I didn't feel comfortable with, putting him in a nursing home, make the hard decisions, you know, be strict with him. Whenever I had to be that person, I had to take the love out of my heart and tell myself that this is a stranger that just needs my care, and I have to give it to him because nobody else is here to do it.
Well, right now I have a friend. In fact, I want to check with her. I didn't check with her before we came on the show, and I'd love to know how she and her mom are doing, because she's been through some stages. She was such a loving, only child, kind like you, very petite, very busy, no children, but yet you could see the angry stages that were coming up, but she tried. So I think I gave her that quote that you said in your book. Just remember, it's not your mother, it's not a stranger. This is your mother, you know, and look at it a different way. And then there's no anger, frustration as, oh, it's going to come out.
Oh, yeah.
And it's okay. You know, you can't be, hey, you can say you're okay. We know you can't possibly be okay, especially if you're not. You're going to be okay, but the truth is it's rough. It's rough. And your book has given me some information to be able to share, encouraging you, even if I don't have the quote quite right. And I changed the title of your book several times, finally got it right. It has impressed me.
I myself have not read the book since I published it, since it is so honest and so raw. I don't want to remember what it is that I have put out there for people to know about me. But the greatest feedback that I have had since doing this is people who are going down the same road, experiencing all of this, and they read this book and they tell me, thank you. Thank you for admitting those feelings.
True.
Because it's the same feelings that I feel, and I feel guilty for it, you know, just wanting it to be over. You know, the guilt you feel for that, wanting your life back, you know.
There's a reason, though. There's a reason, so that you can tell someone else what it's like. It's okay. Let it out. It's okay. Now, Jordan, back in April, when we did the first interview, you signed my book. And I really didn't understand why you signed it the way you did, but I do now, because I read the book. Katie Ann, I'm going to ask her to read this. This is how she signed this book that she's never read to me. I love it. I really do.
Sudi, I hope that I have written you a book of life and not one of death. Please enjoy. Love, Jordan Wilson Sanders.
And I now understand that you were saying, hey, I wrote the truth, and that's why I needed to write it. But don't be depressed. Don't be sad.
There are some hard days.
You know, and there were some really hard days. I found myself crying with you. I found myself laughing. I found myself just being in the middle of what was going on and saying, you told the truth. she cussed. That little girl can cuss. You wouldn't think so.
Nobody was supposed to know that.
Oh, but the point is, it made it so real. Days with My Father's Ghost. And to be honest with you, that's the only book I have read on that subject. Now, we have a little less than 5 minutes left in the show already. Can you believe that?
I know.
And Acadiana, be sure to check out and send her a little note and find out where she's going to be.
And I also sell the books on the website too.
Yeah. So if you're interested in finding out where books are, then they can, for more information, they can check it out for themselves. Now, I'm going to slide into reminding Acadiana, her children had to have had a bunch of questions too, but they actually lived in the situation. Now we want to talk about that upcoming book that we're going to throw out there, which is written for children and asking, Mommy, what is Alzheimer's? So let's talk a little bit about children and what is the best way to kind of explain a topic like this to them.
For me, the biggest way that I could explain it in a way that was acceptable to them and that they could understand first of all, it's not their fault. It's nothing that I did, they did, Papa did. This is just something that happens. We can't stop it. We can't explain it. We just have to, learn how to deal with it.
That's right.
And that it was a brain disease. Something was different with Papa's brain. He wasn't who he was supposed to be. And it's no one's fault.
That's right. And I'd like to encourage you to continue on that journey with this book for children, because I have another children's author, and he's a counselor. And children ask the darndest things, right? Mm-hmm. And they feel safe with a counselor. And he didn't bring out names or anything, but he gave him ideas. He has a series called I Wish. Okay, the I Wish started off with laughter, but now that was his first book. I wish Daddy was Santa Claus, but if he was, blah, 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 in a children's mind. But then as things got serious, he says, I really need to answer in a children's way, some of these questions. Why are there colors? What if there was no colors? How would you explain that? And he's talking about the crazy questions, but he's also getting on topics that are very serious, that children go. For example, I brought this up whenever he was talking about it. I am very blessed. I have two great-grandchildren that are mixed. The daughter is white, of course. The father is African-American. And so they're 6 and 3. And here's this white grandmother, and then here, of course, is the darker complexion grandmother. Why are y'all so different? Mm-hmm. And so you have, basically, I tell them like this: God is our respecter, our people, so therefore we have different colors. I wish I was dark, you wish you was light, it doesn't matter. But the whole point is, in his stories, he actually answers it just enough to let them know everybody's special, every topic is special, and you're dealing with Alzheimer's, and he'll go into this, and then he'll go into, golly, what if there was no difference in the fish in the sea? What if every fish was, we're all different, we can all basically live together, get along together. Doesn't matter how different we are, we're all different. But can we get along, and why?
Yeah.
And so he answers a lot of the little children's whys, and you'd have to see what he's done to really understand, but it's so simple and so powerful without preaching in one certain direction or whatever. Where that's a big topic, okay? Like, Mommy, why you and Daddy don't live together anymore? Mommy, stuff like that. And like I said, there's only certain things you can tell a child and all that. But right now we're going to be at the end of the show, and I want to remind people that she has a children's book that should be maybe out by August or even later.
Yeah, this fall, definitely.
By the fall. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be, Mommy, what is Alzheimer's? Meanwhile, there's a splash of the cover of the book up there right now. So with that said, Jordan, I want to tell you thank you very much for coming on the show.
Welcome.
We finally had this time together. And with that said, I want to thank Acadiana for tuning in, of course, as you know, now every Monday night at 9 p.m. If you have a story you want to share or a business that you want to let people know what's going on, we'd love to have you come in here. It's your dream. It can come true. Acadiana Open Channel makes that possible. Be prepared. You will be seeing the show also not only here but on YouTube and on Facebook. So with that said, Days with My Father's Ghost started this whole thing off, and now she's become a children's author. And Jordan, you may have a series coming up too, different things. So thank you again. And
You're
once
welcome.
more, have a blessed day, have fun, and if you want to write, contact me. I'm also the president of the Writers Guild. Otherwise, I want to hear your story, the story inside of the story.